Metabolic health expert Dr. Ben Bikman has challenged the myth that excess weight is mainly about how much you eat or how often you exercise. According to him, the real driver of weight gain is insulin.
You could have all the hormones in the human body and tens of thousands of calories coming in every day, and if you simply remove one single hormone, it is impossible for that person to get fat. Totally and completely impossible. Now, I am a scientist enough that I like to avoid hyperbolic language. I don't want to state anything in the extreme. And yet, in this case, I actually can. I can revel in all of the power of this declaration, which is you simply wipe out a person's insulin. It is completely impossible for them to get fat.
Insulin itself is not the enemy. It's actually a vital hormone for human health. But when insulin levels stay too high, that's when weight problems begin. The body shifts out of energy burning mode and switches into storage mode.
Insulin acts as the signal, basically, telling the fat cell when it's time to eat and when it's time to share. So, and then if we flip it, in fact, actually, I'll stay there for one more second. We even see this. Someone could say, well, Ben, that's just in fat cells. What about humans? In fact, humans provide the most convincing evidence of all that you cannot get fat unless insulin is elevated.
The problem is that most people who are just starting to lose weight chase quick results and try to deal with high insulin in a very radical way. They jump into long fasts or push themselves through intense, exhausting workouts that, in the end, don't really work. According to Dr. Ben Bikman, these extreme approaches do more harm than good for an unprepared body. Sudden changes or excessive physical strain create stress, and stress drives cortisol levels up. That's where the main mistake lies, Bikman explains. Elevated cortisol triggers insulin spikes and gradually pushes your cells into insulin resistance.
Cortisol will activate glycogen phosphorylase. That's the enzyme that you need in order to take the big, long string of glucose molecules that we call glycogen and start snipping them off one at a time. So the collective effect of all of this, of course, taking the glycogen molecule and snipping it into pieces, getting glucose, or the whole gluconeogenesis, taking any carbons, linking them together into glucose. All of this is this collective effect that ensures that there's going to be energy availability in the form of glucose, in this case, during some scenario, any stressful situation. Including even something as seemingly benign as a fast or some prolonged exercise.
It's best to start simple and, most importantly, comfortable. Dr. Ben Bikman keeps emphasizing one key idea. Weight loss only works when it doesn't feel like punishment. If it's uncomfortable, it won't last. Start small. Take a fresh look at what each meal is made of. Research shows that today about 90% of people gain weight because they eat too often. If you're eating frequently, it means you're having hunger spikes, and that's a sign you're choosing the wrong foods. Every meal should include foods that take time to digest on a mechanical level. That usually means protein, fiber, and fats. What matters is that these components don't spike insulin on a biochemical level, while at the same time activating satiety hormones like GLP-1. If your meals are built around these elements, you'll notice something interesting. You'll start eating less without even trying. And that's the key point. You won't have to force yourself to eat less. Your body will do it for you.
Don't have your first step on your fat cell shrinking journey be low calorie, because you will find that in short order, hunger will win. And so you'll be right back where you started. Let your first step be, I'm going to lower my insulin, because as I lower my insulin, I don't have to worry about hunger, first of all, because if you're just focusing on lowering insulin, you can tell the person, and indeed I am, eat as much protein and fat as you want, because they have little to no effect on your insulin. So anytime you're hungry, eat something with protein and fat. And then if you're not hungry, don't eat. But anytime you're hungry, you don't have to, it's not deprivation, it's not hunger. But the low calorie approach is hunger. You're going to be hungry.
You also don't need to cut carbohydrates completely, especially sweets. That kind of radical restriction creates stress, and sooner or later, it leads to binging anyway. A smarter move is a scientific one. Don't eat carbs on their own, and don't treat them as a snack. Let carbohydrates be part of a proper meal, and eat them after protein and fat. On a mechanical level, this slows digestion. Glucose enters the bloodstream more gradually, which means insulin doesn't spike. With this kind of hormonal response, it becomes easier over time to reduce carbs naturally, because real satiety starts to win. You're not forcing yourself to quit. You simply don't feel the same pull anymore. The one thing Dr. Ben Bikman is very firm about is dinner. Carbohydrates should never be eaten in the evening. If you want healthy sleep, dinner needs to be early, and it should not cause spikes in blood glucose.
Stop snacking in the evening. Anything you can do to not overeat and go to bed hyperglycemic or elevated or spike your blood glucose levels, do it. That's when people are at their weakest. People, you and I could be hanging out all day, walking past a plate of cookies and not be tempted at all until 7 or 8 p.m. It's just human nature. And yet that is one of the worst times to eat it, because when you go to bed hyperglycemic, it activates a part of the nervous system, an aspect of the nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system. That's also known as the fight or flight. So when we hear a car crash right nearby, or we hear a gunshot, then immediately our heart starts beating faster and harder, our body temperature climbs, and we're stimulated. Hyperglycemia will have that effect, and that is terrible timing. Because when you're going to bed, you're wanting to rely on what's called your parasympathetic nervous system, the aspect of your nervous system that is calming. It's lowering your heart rate. It's slowing your heart. It's lowering your blood pressure. It's helping you calm down to sleep better. Hyperglycemia throws that into opposite. So then you're going to bed, you're lying there wondering why your heart is beating so hard, why you are so hot and uncomfortable, and it's because you just spiked your blood glucose with a bunch of sugar.
Healthy sleep is another simple but essential part of any weight loss plan. Dr. Bikman keeps coming back to this topic for a reason. Poor sleep guarantees insulin chaos. Even one night of short sleep increases insulin resistance the very next day. You can eat perfectly and still undo everything with just 4 hours of sleep.
I look at this manuscript and see some of myself reflected in what they did as the intervention. Regardless, 5 hours, they restricted them to 5-hour windows of sleep for several days. And then they did, but not indefinitely. It was just a handful of days. And then they did a measure of insulin sensitivity again and a measure of these hormones again. Now let's look at the hormones first. In table 1, and I'll hold it up here. So some people that are curious about statistics, they'll appreciate this. When they looked at the cortisol number, here's the cortisol and here is the epinephrine. In fact, norepinephrine as well. Those are the two catecholamines. They found p-values. In other words, the differences were less than 0.001 and in some instances less than 0.0001, including cortisol. And so there was a hugely significant increase in cortisol and epinephrine. And remember, especially cortisol is determined. It is called a glucocorticoid. Its main action is considered to be a pushing up of glucose. And so now, of course, you have this war between insulin and cortisol. Cortisol is pushing the glucose up. Insulin is trying to push it down. And so we get into this sort of vicious cycle. As long as cortisol keeps pushing, insulin has to work harder and harder, increasing or reducing its efficacy. And that's what we see. I won't hold it up again. That's just too awkward. So in figure 3, that's where they really detailed like an hour by hour change, in fact, 30-minute by 30-minute change in the cortisol levels. And from the very beginning of doing this new test, after a few days of 5 hours a night, the cortisol was immediately higher. And at some time points, it was twice as high than the people who were in the same person when they were compared to when they were getting a full night of sleep. And then in this study, they did something called a continuous a euglycemic hyperinsulinemic clamp. That is the gold standard. That is considered the best way of measuring insulin sensitivity. And they found that insulin sensitivity was significantly compromised in these people. So that's the study. Just a few days of sleep restriction down to 5 hours per night resulted in significant elevation of stress hormones and a significant reduction in insulin sensitivity.
It's important to understand that improving sleep quality is not about spending more time in bed or taking sleeping pills. Good sleep is not about exhaustion. It's a physiological signal. and you can only improve it through physiological inputs. For example, a cold shower in the morning works with a delayed effect. A short burst of cold sharply increases daytime alertness, reduces daytime sleepiness, and helps reset your circadian rhythm. In the evening, a sauna can also be very effective. The key effect of a sauna is that it overheats your internal temperature system and then allows it to cool down quickly, a kind of controlled physiological shock. As a result, the body falls asleep faster, sleep becomes deeper, and the deep sleep phase gets longer. Many people notice that after a sauna, sleep isn't just solid, it's heavy, without constant waking or restless tossing. Another underrated tool is a calm walk after dinner. It gently lowers evening insulin by helping muscles absorb glucose without hormonal spikes, calms the nervous system without raising cortisol, and creates a natural temperature drop. After light movement, the body cools down and receives a clear signal that it's time to sleep. Approach weight loss lightly, because only then does it become healthy and truly effective.